There's a lot of similarities to art, film, music, and literature that are paralleled in video games. Now more than ever, entire narratives unfold before the player's eyes with lush landscapes, breathtaking sound, and tales that make us laugh, cry, and give us a moment to pause and reflect. And then start just beating the living hell out of anything that moves. Yeah, video games often don't quite have the nuances that can be conveyed in other mediums, but more than that, there's a far bigger problem at hand: shelf life. Unlike most other forms of entertainment, video games typically have a very short period of time that they can make their money. There are exceptions to the rule, especially if it's a game from our good pals at Nintendo, but generally speaking, video games won't last long. From the moment a game is released into the world, the spotlight doesn't stick around. Especially now, new games come out on a near daily basis, with the bigger titles typically sticking to Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, at least here in the US. If a game isn't selling, or if its time is up, copies are shuffled away and replaced with new games, and the cycle repeats. Now this of course is absolutely nothing new, nor is it something specific to video games either. The term shelf life is fairly literal. Stores have limited space that they can display and sell products, and when one isn't selling and has been given enough time, it only makes sense to swap it out for the next big thing. However, compared to say books, movies, or music, video games haven't quite hit that solid flow for preservation. Although spread out, it's not too hard to find TV shows and movies you'd want to watch in some capacity today. Music tends to be more centralized, with various avenues one can use to listen to their favorite artists. Books typically follow suit. Many are released in formats that are easily attainable, and simply require the reader's choice of where they wish to get it from. Because video games are rooted in technology that has improved faster than arguably any other in history, archiving and preserving these has become a huge challenge. There are games that get ported to seemingly everything under the sun, for instance the original Sonic the Hedgehog, or at least with some new features or updates, say Tetris for example. The fact is, a lot of games are missed for various reasons. Anything from poor advertising to a bad release schedule can completely hamper a game's success and stop it from getting what it's due. Availability is also a concern. In a lot of cases, there are titles that stay trapped on a system forever, but the only way to get your hand on it is to pay exuberant prices for something that you may not even enjoy. All this brings me to my two main points of this video: preservation and enjoyment. The bigger of the two, preservation, is important for both historical and archive purposes. We're fortunate that the majority of older titles have been archived thanks to the form of ROM images, and assuming that they haven't been re-released, can be enjoyed with emulators. It's a solid, convenient way to enjoy hard-to-find, out-of-print games, though purists will turn their nose up at the thought, and companies themselves aren't too keen on the subject. In theory, we should be able to simply back up everything and video games will be safe, right? Not quite. As time has worn on and the technology has improved, we've quickly run into a new means for distributing games: the digital storefront. Digital games have ushered in a new means of instant gratification. No longer do you have to leave your home to buy a game. Instead, the game is downloaded directly to your system and it's yours. You keep it forever. At least until the servers shut down. We're entering the dark years now, where our old systems who have collected dust for ages are beginning to lose their ability to connect online. Sony shut down the native PSP store in 2016, but hey, at least you can download those games to a PS3 and load them up that way. Unfortunately, that's not the case with the DSi or the Wii Shop channel from Nintendo. While the Wii Shop channel is still online as of this video, customers can no longer add any funds to purchase games. In 2019, the shop will go offline for good. As for the DSi, while some of its titles are still available on the 3DS eShop, any access to it from the DSi itself is long gone. This is where preservation becomes important. It's unrealistic to expect consumers to purchase everything that comes out, nor should you. But the unfortunate truth is that video games are disappearing forever, and once hard drives fail, that's it. It's a scary thought, made worse when you realize we're already losing games that were once on still active shops. Without getting too deep into the messy territory that is product license and gaming, we've seen plenty of titles that are no longer available for purchase anywhere. Afterburner Climax, for instance, was a great port of a fantastic arcade game. It's all the high-octane action you could ask for in a fast-paced, jet-flying adventure, and if you didn't buy it before December 2014, you'll never get the chance to play it. But hey, that's an arcade game, you know, maybe your local Dave & Buster's will have it, right? Well, there's plenty more games, but this one in particular hits home the hardest. Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I fell in love with these books the summer the movie came out and Scott Pilgrim hit its peak, and while the game isn't perfect, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is an all-around exhilarating and chaotic beat-em-up that harkens back to the days of River City Ransom and Final Fight. Towards the end, Ubisoft actually added Wallace Wells and online play to the game, something I never got to try out, and I never will. The game was delisted at the end of 2014, largely speculated to the license expiring. The unfortunate fact is we will likely never see this game again, and it's a shame that if anything happens to one of my old systems when the servers go down, it'll take one of my favorite games with it. What I'm trying to say here is we really need better efforts from companies to preserve these games. Ports and re-releases exist to make money, that's obvious, but more than that, it's to give the game a second chance and hopefully a second life. A good example of this is Psychonauts, a game that, while critically acclaimed at release, failed to sell the numbers the publisher anticipated. Psychonauts ends on a notorious cliffhanger that seemingly would never be resolved, until years later when the game was re-released on Xbox 360. Then came the Steam release, and suddenly, Psychonauts was getting the recognition it truly deserved. Now as of this video, we've got a full-blown sequel in the works from Double Fine. It's these second leases of life that showed how beautiful Okami is, and how new generations can experience the original mainline Mega Man and Mega Man X games in their entirety in one convenient package. We're at the second point now, the entertainment. It's easy to say the cry for ports of old games are just for selfish, convenient reasons. Hell, I'm not here to dispute that, but there's also an underlying message there. It's the experience. One other reason games go missed is due to the language barrier, plus access. Games have been released for years in countries that never go international. Devoted fans have made a point to translate and share these games the world over, not just in English, but in German, French, Spanish, as many languages as there is interest. And it's that dedication that leads to what I believe is one of the greatest games of all time, Mother 3. Never before and never since has a video game, an RPG, a JRPG no less, captured my imagination, enthralled me with a gripping story, and left me feeling sick, happy, sad, the entire gambit of emotions. What looks like a colorful, cutesy game holds one of the darkest games Nintendo has ever created. It's a game that simply cannot be missed, and to anyone that asks, I always make sure to tell them. But it's not that simple. The fact is, the majority of folks aren't going to take the time to use an emulator or buy a reproduction cart for a game that spans so long and requires so much attention. I've believed for years that the only way a game like Mother 3 will ever truly see the justice it deserves is through a true, official release from its parent company. This is a game that I want to share with the world. I've had plenty of games come close to meeting my personal gold standards. Hell, JRPGs even like Persona 5, but words can't properly describe how wonderful this game is. And that, to me, is why the re-releases, why ports, why the preservation is so important. Like the films that must be seen, like the music that must be heard, and the tales that must be read, there are video games that simply must be played. It's a foolish gambit to think that every 5 years or so, every video game should come to a new system. That's a perfect utopian dream that simply cannot happen. Not with how the industry is laid out, not with the licenses and copyrights, not with the layers upon layers of getting the technology up to speed, not to mention the spirit of business competition, and the list goes on and on and on. But at least, some way, some means to experience these titles without paying an arm and a leg, or extensive hacking, modding, or emulating, some means to experience the games that deserve their time. I can't say I have a solution for that, but until the time comes, we can at least be thankful that there are people working to preserve our favorite industry's history, and hope that someday, the games that deserve their time will get to shine.